just pretty much at the mercy of the prosecutor. So I feel that there's certainly more future in a petit jury than there is in the grand jury. And it is a very complicated issue, what constitutes a peer. I mean, that became very obvious in the Pentagon Papers case. You've got, 44 volumes that the jury is supposed to evaluate whether or not they contain incriminating evidence, and the judge, the defense said that nobody should be on the jury who's not literate. And in the first jury, there was at least one, an intelligent man, but a man who had come to America moderately late in life and had never really learned well to read English. And how was he going to evaluate this evidence himself? Once I got in jail, it was like everything hit the fan, and I mean, all of a sudden it was like watching I guess Mark Twain wrote a story once about somebody came back to his own funeral. That's how it felt. I mean, once I got to jail, I knew they were never going to bother me again because, every time we opened the paper in jail, there was my picture doing something. I mean, it was a very funny feeling. I mean, it was just like your own funeral. I do not think they had any informants in jail or any spies at that time. I mean, they didn't even know which jail I was going to go to. I was supposed to go to the Charles Street Jail, which is the worst jail in New England, but there was a big food riot there about the bugs in the soups. So that last minute they sent me to a different jail, which, very fortunate for me. See, that's in the hands of the marshal, not the attorneys and the marshals, so I'm sure nothing like that went on. By the way, one reason, it's very funny, to show you how complicated this issue is always assume it's good when somebody doesn't talk. My first day in jail, 2 of the prisoners really thought I was a big hero. And it wasn't for about 5 hours that I realized the reason they thought I was such a big hero was they thought I was part of the mafia and I'd refused to talk to the other grand jury in town, the one dealing with organized crime. So they figured I really had good connections, and if they were nice to me, they'd be set up when they got out of jail for life. Excuse me? I can't. Well, that's something I've been grappling with a lot. One of the first parts of it is not to ever let happen again what happened last summer during the campaign when a lot of people working for Senator McGovern felt that the law and order issue was a phony issue and that it was a cover-up for racism. When you take a public opinion poll in America, you find out that the people most victimized by crime are black and that they're as concerned about it as everybody else. And you take an attitude you start out by saying it's a serious and a true problem, and it is not just a cover-up for racist attitudes to be concerned about law and order, and that we want to have a system where we can respect our police. That's sort of the trivial elementary start. And then you just don't panic and think that, shooting pushers is going to stop all crime or something. Well, but it was never picked up for a long time on what passes for the left in America. It was considered a very secondary issue. And it was always left, that was Nixon's issue. I mean, as long as you let that happen, you're in trouble. You can't ever let an issue as important as safe streets become, the preserve of one group. You can let corporate profits be his problem, let our problem be law and order. Yeah, I answered. They never asked me that question again. But once I had then after a while, I had immunity, and then I could start answering questions. And I probably answered 120 questions by saying no, I don't, or no, I haven't, or no, I didn't, or no, I have none. I was asked a lot of questions. I was asked questions about, I think, every newspaper in America that published any part of the Pentagon Papers. I was asked if I knew anything about some radical groups. I was asked, well, those questions I didn't answer about who wrote the Pentagon Papers. Mainly there were an awful lot, finally, when they got down to business, were mechanical questions. Do you know who did this? Do you know who copied that? Do you know who brought that? And all those I could answer. It was the ones I didn't answer were the ones that had to do with very wide fishing about sources. And having said that, I never did answer any questions directly about Daniel Ellsberg on the grounds that since I had already made it clear on every question that dealt with crime, I had no information. To ask me questions about somebody, I would not answer any questions about him until the prosecutor would go to the judge and say why they wanted that information, because that person was a government official that I had interviewed in the course of my research. But in the end, that question somehow got dropped, and I only went to jail for the ones about who wrote the study. By the way, an awful lot of questions they'd ask me, then I'd get immunity, and they never asked them again. I never did figure out why. Well, I think it took August, September, October, about 3 or 4 months till I got immunity. See, the reason I didn't have a much longer jail sentence facing me, when I went to jail, I thought I was going to jail for 3 months, because then the grand jury expired. And by the way, when the grand jury expires, they can at any time, including at this minute, any time in the future, call another grand jury, call me back, and if I don't answer the same questions, I can go to jail again. That's not considered double jeopardy because you're not being trialed on a criminal charge. It's a civil contempt charge. There are some radicals in Phoenix, Arizona who were put in jail for 18 months for not answering some questions about a peace demonstration. When the grand jury expired, a new grand jury was called and they were put back in jail when they didn't answer the questions. They dismissed the grand jury after 1 week. And there were 2 reasons they did it. One is I got support from the places they thought they were winning points, like Florida, Arizona, New Mexico. All sorts of radios and newspapers were all of a sudden outraged at how far they were going against the press. And so they said, well, it's not quite as self-interested if we defend a professor, so they all defended me. And the other thing was, with my being in jail, for a lot of complicated legal reasons I won't, pull apart, it'd take an hour. At the minute I went to jail, it looked like a guaranteed cinch that the Supreme Court would have to take my case because it was such a clear and obvious issue that was unresolved, where the Ninth Circuit and the First Circuit were in dispute, and it was like a great case to win back a little bit of what had been lost in the Caldwell decision. Because I was the first case of a person who had testified very, very, very fully about all questions that could be obviously considered relevant and material to an investigation of a crime, and had challenged questions on the grounds that they were not relevant. And the Supreme Court had said, we will have to do things on a case-by-case basis in the future, and here was like an obvious case where they would have a chance to say, yeah, these questions are not relevant. And most people thought if the court took it, I would win. By dismissing the grand jury and letting me out of jail, the case became moot, and the Supreme Court no longer had a reason to have to take the case to get me out of jail.
Is it significant that the grand jury to specify the subject of the investigation? And if so, is there anybody, legal or otherwise, that can challenge the right of the grand jury to investigate?
No. Well, this grand jury did get some challenges on the grounds that since Ellsberg had already been indicted, it was against the law to have a second grand jury investigating things. You're not supposed to have a grand jury. You're supposed to have all your evidence when the indictment is brought. So the Ellsberg attorneys went into court and said this grand jury should be stopped because it's obviously investigating something for which Ellsberg is already indicted. And the U.S. attorney got up in court and said, no, we are investigating other crimes committed by other people. We are not gathering evidence that will be used in Los Angeles. A month later, they tried to subpoena Senator Gravel, And when that happened, the grand jury got shut down again for a while the Senator Gravel issue went to the Supreme Court. And when the Senator Gravel issue went to the Supreme Court, the Justice Department got up in front of the Supreme Court and said, we need you to hear this case at once because we're going to need the evidence in Los Angeles. You know, I mean, some very funny things went on with this grand jury while it was in session. Just a week. I was very lucky. I mean, I'd barely gotten used to the place, and I wasn't even bored yet when I got out. I mean, the day I went to jail, it was easy from then on, because for a year and a half, which you don't know if it's the 50s or the 70s, and you think you might go to jail, and then when you get out of jail, it'll be like somebody who got put in jail by McCarthy in the 50s. Your friends will stop talking to you, you won't get a job, people will be very uptight. The day I went to jail, I knew that I wasn't going to have that problem, that I'd be able to come to campuses and speak and all these things. And it was like this load off my mind that had been there for so long. And when I found out that there were a lot of nice guys in jail, and the guards even weren't all bad guys, it was just such a relief that, I mean, it wasn't hard yet for 1 week. It hadn't even gotten boring. Well, if there are no more questions, let me say thank you.